So there were a couple little areas where I wanted to add a couple more highlights around the tops of the eyes. And then I'm just going to jump right in to doing the midtones. Typically you want to just wait for all of your highlights to dry, but we are kind of stretched on time here. We want to get these done by Wednesday. So we're going to do the midtones in a color that's friendly with the highlights that you have. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to be adding red to my orange, so I get a little bit darker color, a little bit more red, less water in there. And I'm going to attempt to get the area wet where I want this red to go. And I know it's going to blend okay with my yellow and orange, but you'll see here in a minute what happens. But here I'm showing you all the midtones. So highlights and lowlights or shadows are the easiest places to find, and basically that kind of middle value is where I'm going to be painting most of my red. Also kind of around the edges of the ears. So pretty much most of Bert. The nose is pretty highlighted, but I'm going to make it slightly darker just so it doesn't kind of totally blend in with the nose. The mouth I might do in midtones. I might come back and kind of just make it more shadowy so it kind of stands out a little bit more. We'll see. Actually, it's pretty shadowy already because I filled it in with hatching with my ink. So again, here I go. I don't have as big of a space to work with, so I'm not going to be kind of going over it as much. I'm going around the stuff that I already have. Still painting with water. All right, so watch what happens here. I start dabbing it in, and it's going to go right. Oh, I added more red. That's what I did. And see how it is seeping into everything. So this is why ideally you want to wait until all of your highlights dry. I would have liked it better if that didn't happen, but if you kind of work while everything's still wet, you can definitely dab a lot of that out, which is what I'm doing right now. So I'm getting my brush really dry, and I am blotting that out, kind of like what you would maybe do with a sponge. The nose area too, it kind of slowly fades in to those midtones, and so I'm dabbing some out, but I'm not as worried about dabbing it out as lightly. And now I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to just keep adding those midtones to those areas. And like I said, those smaller areas, you don't even necessarily have to get it wet first. And sometimes too, if you do a wet on dry technique, not having those edges blend perfectly kind of adds to that kind of loose, messy, controlled look, which is nice too. So it's nice to kind of have that blend. So I'm just adding more midtones. And when you get to this bottom, you really want to just try, and you don't want it to be super harsh where kind of the bottom of the neck meets the background, because again, it's going to kind of make it look more like it's a blunt edge like decapitation, which we're not going for. So when you get to that bottom edge, you're going to want to kind of blend it out and blot a lot of that out as well, which you'll see me do here. So I'm adding water, so it kind of is getting lighter and lighter. Now I'm drying out my brush and I'm dabbing some of that out, so it kind of slowly transitions from that mid-tone color to my background color. You want it to kind of have that nice gradient so it doesn't look super abrupt. Right, I'm going to add some midtones kind of around the ears. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up here. Maybe I'll go ahead about 30 seconds so you can kind of see what I'm doing more quickly. And then you can see I have the other ear. Now, as long as the background is fully dry, you can take a complementary color and kind of splatter it around, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm adding a little orange to my yellow, and I'm going to just kind of hold my brush over and kind of flick it over. I don't really care if any gets right on Bert. I think it kind of just adds to the fun kind of messiness of this style. But as long as your blue or whatever background color you have is totally dry, orange is on the opposite side of the color wheel. So typically if they were both wet, it would totally make brown. But that's why watercolor, you kind of have to have a lot of patience. You work in layers. So if you have a lot of stuff in your brush, a lot of pigment, you're going to have bigger drops. Smaller drops come from when there's less in your brush, but you kind of have to flick it harder. And so they kind of almost look like they're more in a line. So keep that in mind. You can kind of flick it like you just saw what I did with my hand. But if you don't have enough paint, it won't work good. Also, you kind of have to keep in mind how close or how far away from your paper is going to make a difference in how it kind of splatters on. So here I'm adding more mid-tone pigment to the nose. I'm leaving those kind of outer edges for shadowy colors. So I'm just kind of adding that in the middle. And I think what I'm going to do next is take just a tiny bit out. So I feel like it was just a little bit dark, and I kind of had a puddle anyway, which would make it dry just slightly darker. So here we are. This is where I said I was done. Shadows next.